You're listening to When Love Comes, the podcast, a safe space for single women of faith on a journey of healing, growth, and preparing for the love you deserve. This resource was created with you in mind, so you'll be ready when love comes. Hey, y'all. Welcome to another episode of When Love Comes, the podcast. I am so excited about today's episode. I get to spend this time with someone who I recently met. We had a really great conversation, and I was like, you know what? We got to continue this conversation. So, this podcast really is a resource for anyone who is healing from heartbreak, maybe on that healing journey, trying to figure out what healthy relationships look like. I'm your host, April Nowlin. I am a divorce recovery and relationship coach. And after 3 failed marriages, one of the things that I realized along that journey was, look, y'all, I didn't know what healthy relationships were. I didn't know what they looked like. I didn't know how to identify them. So literally for the last 5 years, I've been on this journey to figure out, what does that look like? What does it
Mhm.
look like to have a healthy relationship? How do you prepare? How are you healed from some of the trauma that gets us into these unhealthy relationships? And so I'm bringing you guys this resource so that you and I can be ready when love comes. So, Jess, I want to welcome you to the podcast.
Hi, April. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited today. I know we had a great conversation last time, so I'm kind of excited to see where it goes today.
Yes. So the conversation she's talking about, I was recently had the honor to be a guest on her Soul Sessions podcast. So she's a podcast host. She's amazing, guys. She's also a therapist. She is also a mental health advocate. And so when I was on her podcast, we had this great conversation, and she and I are in a similar place in life of kind of newly being single, navigating this road of healing. And so I wanted to continue the conversation here. So, Jess, I just want to start with whew, the healing journey.
Oh my
What what
gosh.
is the
So
healing
many things.
journey? So, if you could describe it, what is it?
So, the healing journey for me was a long, continuous path back to myself. Because I wanted to heal, not necessarily to get into my next relationship, because I don't even know truly if I'm ready for that, but I wanted to heal enough where I felt comfortable with myself again, where I felt like I loved and respected myself, and that I was kind to myself. So that was what healing looks like for me.
I love it. I think that is one of the best, simplest definitions of healing I've ever heard in my entire life.
Oh, thank you. You're hyping my head up.
Like, I love it. And healing looks different for everybody,
It
right?
does.
So your journey won't look like my journey. Our journey won't look like someone else's journey. And I think that's
Mm-mm.
very important to start with that, because sometimes we can compare ourselves to where other people are at. And
Sure.
we'll start asking those questions like, why am I not there yet? So you said something really honest. You were like, I don't even know if I'm ready for another relationship. And that's an honest place to be in. So I want to start by, what are some of the things that hold us back from healing?
Mm. I think there's a long list for a lot of people, but for me personally, I'm going to talk from my personal experience and like professional experience. So in my personal experience, I think what held me back from healing was my expectations of myself. I wanted to, like, we talked about this previously, I had a breakup where I wasn't the one who made the decision, and I was very upset about that. I wanted to be the one to do that, so therefore for my healing I wanted it to really be on my own terms. And in my head, following the breakup, I gave myself 2 days. I had one day where I laid in bed and did nothing. and, then, and then my next day was like, all right, Jess, you got to get up. You got to at least like take yourself out. Like, you have to get out the house. And then I quickly learned that that was not the case, that little things would trigger me. I would have to come back to a place that we had shared moments in. I would have to come back into, like, I more recently actually I found one of his t-shirts. So there's like these little reminders that come. I didn't even realize I had this. I was so mad at myself. And also, like, there's this, when you put your expectations on yourself, you put a lot of pressure on yourself to believe that you have to do this in like 2 days, in my example. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to cry after this. I'm not going to feel any emotion, which is not true. Like I still feel emotions. I feel so many things. And I think putting ourselves into boxes and expectations, and instead of just letting ourselves feel. And I think a lot of people do that with a lot of situations. We don't really sit in our feelings. We don't really experience our feelings. And those feelings don't have to be like anger or happiness. They could be frustration, guilt, sadness, like those more complex things, I think, too. And then from a professional standpoint, I think what holds people back is, so we have our expectations of ourselves, and then we have the expectations others put on us. And the expectations others put on you could be like, you have a friend and she's like, girl, it's been like 3 months, like, let's go outside. Maybe you're not ready to go outside. Like, that's fine. But those expectations others put on you, or why are you still crying? Why are you like, it's okay to still feel those ways. And I think the moral of what I'm saying is that like expectations really just got to go, because you are going to go, there's so many ebbs and flows to this. It is not like a straight line. There's no stopping point. If I'm being honest, it's a continuous thing. And even getting into another relationship, you still might have some of those triggers and stuff. So it's really just expectations.
Yeah, I agree 100%. One of the things that I feel like held me back from, I would say, healing faster than maybe
Right.
what I, wanted to, right?
Right.
Was I kept having this expectation. So going back to expectations of what healing was supposed to feel like or look like. And part of that was I expected to be the same person I was before the relationship.
Mm,
Because we hear terms like, I want to get back to myself.
mm-hmm.
And I think instead of us looking at that and saying, what does the healthy version of myself look like right now? We're waiting to be that person we were before we were in that relationship. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like a relationship, especially if you've been in it for
A
some
long time.
time,
Right.
right? And then there was feelings, it just changes you. And
It
so I
does.
don't think we'll ever go back to being that person we were before. But I think the healthier expectation is, how can I be the best version of myself now
Mm,
and going forward, right?
right.
After coming out of that relationship.
Right. And I think the also understanding that when you, even if it's a short-term relationship, I don't know if you necessarily want to go back to who you were before that either, because when you're talking about who you picked, what happened, there might be some stuff and some growth that came out of that, although it's painful, that really could benefit you going forward. And going back to ourselves, like in my experience, I think if I were to go back, I would go back to somebody who wasn't kind to themselves, or who wasn't didn't respect themselves enough to move forward in the relationship. So
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. When I think about, people ask all the time, how did you get into these three marriages that all ended the same way? And it was because I was the same person in all three of them. And
mm,
then I was dating a similar person in all three of them. And it wasn't until I made the decision that I was going to be different that I started to choose different.
differently, yeah.
And so it becomes this cycle of, well, like you said, I'm going to go back to the person I used to be, but that person, I didn't honor myself. I didn't honor my boundaries. I didn't expect anyone else to honor my boundaries. So I don't want to be that person. I want to take what I learned in this relationship and become a better person.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I want to talk about some misconceptions that people have about healing. So we're talking about, everyone's journey is different. What are some of those things that I would say people use to compare their journey to others? What are some misconceptions out there?
A lot. I think I'm thinking of the way in a way that media has portrayed breakups and relationships.
Yeah.
So we're talking like rom-coms, comedy movies. Like I think some of the best rom-coms always start with the woman breaks up with someone at the beginning of the movie, and then she meets the love of her life as she goes back home, and like that's just not gonna happen. That's not how, like, I mean,
Right.
it could, but for majority of people that's not how it's gonna go. So I think kind of having this expectation that because you got out of one relationship you have to go into another, and I don't think that's true at all. Like that doesn't starting a new relationship does not signify healed. It does not signify healing. It doesn't represent anything of that. It could, but for the most part, it doesn't represent most of that. And one of the other misconceptions, the timeline. Healing is not a terminal process. It is something that is forever ongoing. And like I said, you also don't know what triggers you until you're triggered. So you find something, you see something that reminds you of someone, you go to a restaurant that you guys used to go to for the first time, and now it has a different feel to it, and it feels just different. And that doesn't mean that you're not healing. It just means that you're human and you have space to kind of just again feel those things that make you uncomfortable. Um Man, there's so many misconceptions, but expectations, time, and I say the biggest misconception I had was the dating thing. Like I felt that I had to go out and date the next day. One, because of the way our relationship ended, but two, because I was like, I'm pretty, I'm young, I'm educated, like I am emotionally intelligent. Who wouldn't want me? In the same effect, I was nowhere near ready to go to another relationship. I was not ready at all. Like so I was hurt by what had happened in the past that I would hurt somebody else doing like starting over at that
Yeah.
moment. So I think that for me, it's really that jumping to one relationship to another. It's just not healthy, and professionally and personally, it's just not a good idea most of the time. You should give yourself a grace period, is what I like to call it. And a grace period is not 3 to 4 days. It's,
Right.
a couple months, maybe a couple weeks, enough time where you have enough time to take a step back out of your emotions. So, and kind of evaluate the situation objectively versus really feeling and you're making decisions from those feelings.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think one of the biggest misconceptions I had about the healing journey was why I needed to heal.
Mm,
And so it aligns exactly what you're talking about was a lot of people at the time would tell me, well, you need to heal so that you can be a better wife next time. You
next
need
time.
to heal so that you can pick a different man, a different partner. But it wasn't until the third divorce that someone was like, well, maybe you should just heal so you can be happy. And
Mm,
I was like, wow. It was like my healing was always tied to the next relationship.
hmm.
And so that goes back to rom-coms, Disney, where, like you said, you've got this couple and they break up and then they get back together at the end and
Right.
everything is great. But to be honest, they probably should have broken up and stayed broken up. It
Yes, they should have.
was probably a toxic relationship and you didn't need to
For
be
real.
together.
For real.
But because of, society or even culture, right?
Hmm. Culture.
We get to a certain age, I'm in my 40s, where people are, why aren't you married? Why
Mm,
are you still single?
yeah.
Right. And so that healing journey becomes less and less about you being a healthy person and becomes more and more about getting to the next relationship or getting into
Mm.
the next relationship.
I
And so
think
I agree.
yeah, that's such a big point about the like cultural expectations. As
Mhm.
somebody in my 20s, kind of hitting that age where I should have been in a relationship, or like
Mhm.
all my friends are in long term relationships, they're married, they're doing quote unquote what they're supposed to do.
Right.
And my family members, my cousins, the same thing. And I think I loved my boyfriend a lot. I did. But I
Mhm.
think our relationship started with the fact that I felt familial pressure to
Mhm.
have someone to be with. Because, like, my parents were like, I want grandchildren, I want to see you have kids and all this stuff. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for that, y'all. But I could talk to somebody. Like, I could show that it was like approving to other people that I was capable of being in a relationship publicly to them. And in that vein, I don't think it started off the right way. And that led to like more stuff in the healing process as well.
Yeah, that's something that I dig into a lot is how did you get into the relationship?
Hmm.
Like, what were your reasons for getting into the relationship? Because that's going to tell a whole lot about where you were at, where they were at, like the health of that relationship is how did you even get
Hmm.
into the relationships? Like you said, you had the pressures. I know from one of my marriages, I was working at the time at a church and I
Hmm.
was the pastor's assistant, him and his wife's assistant, and late 20s. And people kept saying, oh, you shouldn't be single in this position. It doesn't look good for you to be single. You really should be, dating someone. And so honestly, that wasn't the only reason why I got into that particular relationship, but it added to, well, maybe you're right.
Right.
Maybe I shouldn't be single. Maybe I should be. And then, like you said, I was late 20s, you're almost 30. My friends are getting married, cousins are getting married, and you're like, all right, well, maybe this is the time to do this because this is what people do at this
Right.
age. And so I think taking a step back as you're healing and really asking yourself, how did I get into that, is a
Hmm.
good way to assess what your mindset about dating and relationships and why you even want to be in a relationship.
Yeah. And I think with kind of something we're kind of touching on a little bit is the idea of community.
Yeah.
And the misconception I feel around community is that all the people around you are going to support you in this decision. And that's
Mhm.
not true at all. That there are certain people that during my breakup I would not call. Guaranteed would not call at the time because I wasn't ready to hear it.
Yep.
Like I wasn't ready to hear where I messed up. I wasn't ready to hear any of those things. And then there were people that I knew what they could do for me in the moments that I needed the most. So when I needed somebody to cry to, when I needed somebody to really talk to, the importance of having those people around me. And it's not something you have to go through alone, and you really shouldn't go through alone. Like you really, really, this is where like, your village kind of comes in and people you could lean on and support. People that would support you in your decision though. You don't really, and this is hard to do because of boundaries and connections and ties and stuff, but people that will support you in your decision to leave a relationship or to end a relationship for whatever reason, and they understand it and they approach you with compassion and empathy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so imperative, even on your journey through life, right?
Yeah.
Particularly if you're single, you need the right community for a couple different things. One, you need people that you have given permission to call you out when they see
Mm,
stuff. There is a team that I have that they'll be like, April, you're dating this guy and I'm starting to see this behavior, but I've given them that permission, right, to say
mm,
that. Or on the healing journey with my relationship, on paper, it would have been the ideal relationship.
mm,
And it was, I would say, a good relationship. However, I do not believe it was the best relationship for either one of us. And it was
mm-hmm,
my decision to end that relationship. The easy thing would have said, well, it's good. And we can maybe figure out these other things, right? But having the right community who set me down and said, okay, yeah, these areas are good, but here's some areas that we really need to look at.
mm.
And having that team to say, let's really think about this relationship. But yeah, on paper, it looked great.
I feel that. I feel that. I went to this was around the holidays, and we had broken up about a month, literally right before Christmas, Thanksgiving time. And one of my family members had come up to me. She's like, "Oh, where's your boyfriend? Like, I thought you guys would be together." And I'm like,
Oh.
what had happened was, and
Mhm.
so having that conversation, and she's like, "You guys just look so cute together. Like, you guys were a really good looking couple, and you're both like intelligent. You're like all this stuff." And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, great people individually. It was a okay relationship. Like, it was enough, but it wasn't enough for either of us at the same time."
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like just because you look good together or like you said look good on paper doesn't necessarily mean that either of us felt fulfilled.
Yeah. That's so good that it wasn't good enough for either of us.
Mm-mm.
And that's such an honest statement to make and to come to that reality of this is good. I said this things can be good, but I feel like we deserve great.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we have to say no to good things in order to say yes to great things.
Yes. Yep. I wholeheartedly believe that. And in a breakup doesn't have to have malintent. It doesn't have to feel super
Mm-mm.
negative or nasty. It could simply be a sitting down having a conversation of this isn't working. I'm not feeling this. I know you're not feeling because you've expressed this, and that's okay. Like you're still, it still was a good time. You still learned something from it.
Mhm.
Like it also doesn't mean you cared for that person any less. it doesn't mean anything. It's just the fact that it just wasn't the right person, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think that's the way breakups should happen. And I
Right? They
think
should.
more breakups would happen that way if we were honest with ourselves early enough in the relationship. Because I do think that we see things a lot of times earlier, way before we make that decision, but
Hmm.
we either try to explain them away, we sugarcoat it, we avoid it, right? We avoid the hard conversations. And I
Hmm.
do think that a lot of us could have avoided some major heartbreak if we had had those hard conversations when those things came up versus months or years down the line.
Right, right. And I think part of that though is like how we said earlier, how you coming into the relationship. Like
Mhm.
I know for my last relationship, I was a little more healed, and so I was able to communicate some things. I wasn't fully where I needed to be to actually get what I needed. So going forward now, I feel that I'm way way in a better place to from the jump. I'm not scared. I've been dating a little bit, and if something about immediately, I'm like, I am not scared anymore to kind of say what I need when I need it. And if that can't be met, then okay, that's it.
Yeah,
And it
that's
happens earlier than, a year down the line.
That's a great place to be in. So I want to talk about something. So as you guys are listening to us, we're talking from we've moved past the crying stage. We've moved past, some of the heavy emotions that came with our relationships ending. And you guys are like, look, April, I'm not there. I'm not nowhere near there. So how do we
Yeah.
get there? One of the things I want to talk about is self reflection, personal growth. So now we're saying things like, yeah, we had these hard conversations and all these things, but what are some of the things that along this journey you've had to go back and say, okay, this is what I learned from this. So about myself, even in this journey, like this is what I learned from that relationship that's going to help me to um, be in healthier relationships in the future.
Whew. That's a big question. um, I think I'll start by saying this. My last relationship was probably the healthiest relationship I've been in ever. And which is beautiful for me. Great, fantastic. But I learned a lot about myself in my boundaries, in my respect, and how much in the future, I'm learning to not let my infatuation or love for someone kind of put blinders on me. And those come from my interactions with him. And for myself, I learned how to communicate better. I learned to say things faster. And I had a very bad habit of bottling stuff up and brushing it off and kind of just being like, oh no, that's not what I think it is. I'm just reading too much into it. That's fine. But it still nags me in the back of my head. So I think when it comes to I'll say my top three personal growth things out of this were my boundaries are very firm now. Previously, my boundaries were kind of willy nilly, and I learned that the disrespect that came from that was something that I could not allow because it put me in such a negative space. And I'm like, that is not somewhere I want to be ever again. Now, in my relationship, this previous one, it did not happen as often as it did before. So I was able, this is where that kind of brushing stuff off comes into play. And I was like, I mean, it's not happening every day like it was before. This is once in a while type of thing. And I think my second biggest lesson or growth point was that I need to talk. I really do need to talk. And it doesn't have to be an argument. It doesn't have to be this big to do. It could simply be when you said this, I felt this way. When you did this, I felt this way. Or right now, I'm feeling very overwhelmed. Can you give me a minute to just take a step back? I can't talk right now because I'm gonna say or do too much. And that was very hard for me because I'm very, some might say impulsive. And not impulsive of making rash decisions, but when I'm feeling an emotion like anger or sadness, I'm very quick to want to spill that out. And sometimes that could come out very maliciously. And that's not my intention, but that's the impact of my words. So I learned that. And I think the final thing was how much, and this was very hard. This I've mulled over, gone to therapy for, all this stuff of how much I need to respect myself, because I always respect my partners. I always am kind to people. I'm always extending all this grace, and that's all I do all day. All I do is tell other people and validate other people and support them, but I couldn't do it to myself.
Yeah.
And I was sitting somewhere in a relationship where I wasn't getting the validation and support I needed from him, and I can't give it to myself either. So I'm just stuck feeling, pretty bad. And I didn't want to feel that way. And so through some therapy, some journaling, and talking, actually like expelling these feelings out, I'm like, I need to tell myself affirmations. I need to remind myself that I am worthy of something, and that some of the ways I do that are by maintaining firm boundaries, or you know saying my feelings. So I think it's very hard to do. Like, self-growth is often painful. I think of it as like when a kind of a flower is like sprouting out of the dirt. You see it little by little, you don't see it all at once. So there's roots that have to get the line. Like, it's a lot. It is a lot, but it is very much worth it after the fact. But the whole process before that, I was crying, I was screaming, I still had outbursts,
Yeah.
and I still was like feeling some type of way. And then I was like, no, I can't continue to be like this because this isn't getting me what I want.
Yeah. Oh, those are good. Those are really good. I would say for me, the two that really stand out was paying attention to that little voice
Mm-hmm.
when something would be said, and like you, this was my healthiest relationship, which was even, harder sometimes to say I need to make this decision to end it, because I was like, man, I've never
Think,
had a relationship like this. Like, we actually
right?
communicate, he respects my boundary. Like,
Yeah.
it was a tough decision, but the two things that stood out for me was, one, listening to that little voice. So
Mm-hmm.
there were times that things were said, and I would get that little feeling like, I'm not sure how
What
you
is
meant
that?
that. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
what is that? And previously, I would just sweep that under the rug. And then it would build resentment. It would come out in a burst of anger and an argument. And so for me, I had to sit with it for a moment. Okay, what am I feeling? And then be able to have that tough conversation of like, hey, you said this. What did that mean? What
Mm-hmm.
did you mean by that? And I think the fear that I had was, it was something I didn't want to hear.
Mm.
Like, his
Oh,
answer
yes.
was something I didn't want to hear.
Absolutely.
Right? So, I don't know if I should ask this, but that was big for me, was just learning to listen to that little voice, and then also putting a name to my feelings.
Mm.
So, because of my past relationships, like you said, you can get triggered at any time. There may have been something that he would do or say, and immediately my thought would be, oh, I've seen this before, right? I've seen this behavior. This means that, or means this. And so, once again, taking the time to go back and have that hard conversation of, okay, you said this or you did this. What did it really
What is
mean?
it? Right.
Yeah. What is
Yeah.
this?
I think being curious is such an important thing too, and the questioning thing is very important because, like you say, you often feel things. You have some sort of intuition about some things, but sometimes most of the times we're too scared to ask the question. And maybe most of the time it's not what you say; it's how you're saying it as well. You could be
Right.
curious from a place of just trying to figure something out and not accusatory.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk about something, getting stuck. So, once again, once again, we're talking from this place of, Jess is a therapist, I'm a life coach. So we're talking from a place of experience, but also education. And
Mm-hmm.
so I want to be real about getting stuck on the healing journey, because we're still human. We're still women,
Right. Yep.
right? Was there at any point that you felt like you were stuck on this journey?
The first few months, honestly, I was very stuck. I was so stuck in my feelings of hurt that, like, I was replaying. the conversation over and
Mhm.
over, because particularly for me, because I was not the one to make the decision, and he said a few things that really stuck with me, and I spent like the next like 4 months analyzing like every part of the relationship. I'm like, what if I did this? What if I said this? What if I did? I was like, no. And I went through it in my head, like all these different moments. And that kept me stuck. Like I was so stuck on trying to go back and fix, knowing that we weren't going to get back together. Like that wasn't an option. But I wanted to make myself feel better in some way by reevaluating, because I thought maybe if I could pinpoint exactly where it went wrong, then I could try to do better or whatever the case may be. And that was not the case. So I spent a lot of time doing that. And then I also spent a lot of time um, being angry,
Yeah.
like, which is a very valid emotion, extremely, extremely valid. And I think in my case, I was, again, especially angry because I wasn't the one to make the decision. And I had been feeling that way for a while, but he got to say it first. So I was mad. I was being petty and I was mad that he got to say it first and I didn't get a chance to. So once I got past, like, oh, I'm sad I won't be able to see him, that stuff, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you really got to say that first and I didn't get to say that? So then I was stuck there for a minute. And then I was like, I had to like sit myself down and I was like, Jess, what are we doing right now? Like, we haven't, even in my therapy sessions, I was still talking about my relationship like 4 months down the line. And I was like, nothing's changed. Nothing's happening. I'm still feeling the same way I felt the day of the breakup. I wasn't necessarily taking care of myself in the best way. And I was like, what is happening? So, and it's so subconscious. It's so something that's like you're not aware of, that it's not until my therapist was like, bless Taylor, she was like, you know, we've been talking about this for a minute now. Do you have anything else going on? And I'm like, I do have a life. She's like, how are your clients? Like, how's work? And I'm like, oh yeah, I've been doing that for 4 months. Like, I was
Right.
so hyper fixated on my relationship that I had really forgotten about other parts of my life. And to that same effect, unfortunately, because my job requires so much active listening and I work with kids, so it requires a lot of movement, I was so disconnected in my sessions and I could feel myself being disconnected,
Mhm.
which is not like me at all. I could feel that there's a wall between me and the client. And at one point, one of my teenagers, she was going through like a breakup, and I was like, then I got real into it. That was the only time I remember like really getting into it, because it was kind of healing for me too. But I was so disengaged from other parts of my life. I wasn't taking care of myself. And I'm like, it wasn't until somebody called me out, I was like, I really have been talking about. And then I went through my text messages with my friends and I was like, oh my,
Mhm.
Jess, get a life. Go do something. This man, he's not even probably thinking about you. Like,
Right.
what are you doing right now? So yeah, that was my stuck for a while.
I love it. Woo! I tell you, that being stuck, I had a similar experience. So my being stuck was not over not being with him. My being stuck was the failure of the relationship
Mm.
because I got stuck in the cycle of I know better. How did I let this happen? How did
Mm-hmm.
I get into this? Like I do this for a living, you know. How can
Exactly.
I be in this relationship that ended? And so like you, I kept replaying that and I kept wanting to figure out almost like a why. Like why did I end up here? Why did I
Mm-hmm.
waste my time? Why? And I had a friend of mine. It was about 3 months out and she's like, are you sure you don't want to be back in that relationship?" And I was like, "No." And I meant that. Like I knew when I made the
Wholeheartedly.
decision, right, wholeheartedly, this was it. She goes, "Because you talk about it all the time." And I was like, "No, I don't." She's like, "Let's look at your text messages." I was like, "Dang,
I did that for real.
I did that." And so, like you, I didn't realize how much I was fixated on just trying to figure out the why, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why did I end up here? Why did I waste my time? Why this? Why didn't it work? And then for me, being in my 40s, there was a point in my relationship with him when I thought this is it. Like, I'm done. This is my future. I don't have to go back to dating. And now I'm like, why am I single again?
Yep. How did I get back
Why?
here?
how did we get back here? And it's funny because, you and I both work with people and I coach women who are healing from heartbreak, dating, all those things. And I would do the same thing. I found myself just kind of like, okay, all right,
Hmm.
okay, all right.
I'm sorry.
So no. It's real life, y'all. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation because once again, you can see things on social media, you can, listen to different things, you can see different movies, and there's this false sense of what healing actually looks like. And this is
Hmm.
the real. It's not pretty, it can be messy, it can hurt, all those things, but that's why we're talking about it. So we want you guys to know that the things that you're feeling is real life. We've been there. We are there, and
Yes,
this is what we do for a living.
literally.
So what do you feel like was a turning point for you? So when I think about a turning point, when did you start to feel like, okay, I'm maybe getting my confidence back, or I'm
Mhm.
getting becoming, that new version of myself? Where did you feel like, and you might still be in it, what was that turning point for you?
Honestly, I think the turning point happened about 2, 3 weeks ago. I don't know what it was necessarily. I have been consistently take like I'll some background. So I've been consistently taking care of myself. I've been taking myself on dates. I do things that I like more. I haven't dated like in that time period that I was doing this. I was enjoying my career. I was kind of making some advancements and I was having fun. And I just kind of, I don't know if it was the happiness and the joy that I was getting from that felt, I woke up literally beginning of February and I just felt different. Um, and I want to say, here's how I know I hit a turning point because I got back on dating apps and I saw my ex boyfriend on there.
Oh my.
Opened the app. Yeah. Oh, the shock, the scream I let out. I opened the app and I was like, but I didn't have the reaction I thought I would, and that's
Mm,
how I knew I was kind of moving forward. Because I've always, you in my stuck phase, I was replaying like if I saw him again, if we ran into each other, whatever. And when I saw him, I was just kind of like, okay. And in my turning point, I think it was just because I had invested so much into myself, and I
mhm.
really, really, genuinely started loving myself that I just woke up feeling different. And loving myself looked like all sorts of things. It was, like I said, dates, therapy, having fun, just being genuinely happy and not having to worry about the pressure of a relationship or the pressure of the expectations of another person. And that led to this kind of, it wasn't an instant change either. It was a gradual, slow thing. And it's helped a lot. And it's really been really cool to see. And even my family notices and my friends, like, oh, you look so happy now. And I'm like, well, I was, I was fresh out, y'all. Like,
Right.
calm down.
Ooh,
Um, but yeah, once I saw him, I was like, and I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I was just like, well, I'm glad that he's happy. That was it. And then I just X'd and I kept going. Like, there was no, I thought I would have a bigger I did have a little reaction when I saw it because, Hinge put him in my first person that when I opened the app, and I
mhm.
was like, I really do have a type. Interesting. But yeah, so that was my turning point. Was very slow and a lot of love for myself.
I love it. Yeah, I think for me, I made the choice. I talk about that a lot, that
Mm,
we have to make a choice to heal. Healing doesn't just happen, it is an intentional process.
mm,
And making that choice to invest in myself again.
mm,
So, like you, started working out again,
mm-hmm,
started eating better, started just investing in myself. I'm a reader, ordered a
mm,
bunch of books. I'm like, all right, we're going to dive into some books. Started just doing things that would enhance my quality of life. So
mm-hmm.
my situation is a little unique that my ex and I are business partners.
Mm.
Yeah. And so sorry. Woo!
Woo! That- Fun.
So
It sounds like a great time.
it was amazing. The good thing was or is, though we own a business together, we do different things, so we would rarely actually see each other. And outside of business meetings, we would not have a lot of communication. And I'm very grateful that during our romantic relationship, we really kept our working relationship separate.
Mm,
And so it was a little easier in the fact that our working relationship had always felt different.
mm.
But, that first month or two, anytime we'd have to have a business meeting, it would just be like, all right, here we go. We got to do this. And I think the turning point for me, and he and I had a conversation about a month ago. It was kind of that, closure conversation, and that helped because we knew that we had, for lack of better words, this baby that we're co-parenting. So it's like, okay.
Mhm.
And we didn't hate each other out of the breakup, but it hurt, right? On both ends. It hurt. And so it was during that time that I made the choice to, okay, I've got to move forward and
Mhm.
invest in myself in moving forward. And so for me, what that looked like when I knew something had changed was the next time I saw him, it was just kind of like, oh, hey, business partner, you know,
Right.
and I didn't have those feelings of like, oh, here we go, you know.
Mhm.
And so it's making the choice to start investing in yourself. It's making the choice to invest in self-love, whatever that looks like for you. And that may be taking yourself out on dates. I like to hike, so going out in nature. I live in Arizona, so at the time of this recording, it's winter, it's cool outside, so it's nice. We can go out without dying on a mountain. It's making the choice.
It is. And I think one of the biggest things that also came like with the loving myself, I know that when I left my relationship, I felt bored a lot of times. I didn't realize how much time I was spending with this person. And I was like, Jess, like you really didn't have much to do outside of this. So in those times, this is like so true though. I was like, because that's how our relationship was. We would both go to work, we would see each other, and it was really consistently that way. And when it came, because we would always spend every Sunday together, and it was our first Sunday that we weren't spending together, I was just bored out of my mind.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started taking myself out. I was like, I need to get out of the house. I need to do something that would help me distract myself from this. And that's kind of where that self love moment came out of. And now it's like it's evolved into something more. So I think not necessarily to fill the gaps of the relationship, but in those times that you feel that you miss the person or you're feeling something uncomfortable, I think that would be a good time to journal, take a long shower, listen to music, read a book. Like you said, it doesn't have to be like a big grandiose thing. It could be very chill, watching a movie, watching one of those rom coms that isn't real, and just kind of chill for the night.
I don't know. Be careful with the rom coms, y'all. I'm telling you, don't get
Nah,
that
for
and
real.
Disney. They'll
And
both get you.
yes,
They will
yes, they
get you.
will. They will.
Yeah, I think for me, we didn't see each other as much. Most of our relationship, we lived about an hour apart,
Mm,
and then we were both single parents, and so we didn't see each other as much. But my God, we talked all day. Like
mm,
I remember when we first
yeah.
started dating, my phone gave me this notification, and it was like, "Your phone time is increased by like 300% this week," and I was like, "What? Who am I talking
Really?
to?"
That's me.
That's me. So for me, the void wasn't a physical void, but he had been the person I called all the time. Anytime something happened, we called.
Hmm.
And so I had to figure out something else to do with that time when I wasn't calling him. So that was the
Hmm.
void that I felt was like, oh, this happened. Oh, okay. Or
Yep.
I'm on my way to work. Oh, okay. And so finding something to do with that time that was going to invest in my healing and not keep me stuck in those feelings of sadness or remorse or, oh, we can't talk. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to read. My go to
Hmm.
shows are serial killers.
Oh,
Um,
same.
right? I need to know how to not get caught. So give me a good true crime.
True crime. Exactly.
I'm telling you, ladies, that's a good go-to. Forget Disney, go to true crime.
True crime.
It'll
Easily.
keep you focused.
Easily.
So, Jess, I want to talk about one thing before we close. If there's someone who's struggling, who's like, y'all, I'm listening to this podcast and I hear you guys, you seem authentic, you seem happy, which I feel like I am. I feel like Jess is authentic. If there's someone struggling, what is some advice you would give them?
Hmm. I would say give yourself the same grace, validation, and words you would give to a friend. Because we are often, I know I am for sure, way too critical of ourselves and way too harsh on ourselves. And I always say, what I've started saying to myself, would you say this to like your best friend? Would you tell her that? And if I say no, then why am I telling myself that? Like, it's very much be so gentle with yourself, where, especially in those early stages where you're still feeling a lot, you're still kind of having probably more ups and downs than you would later, that you are kind and compassionate. And compassion looks maybe just like letting yourself cry for a few hours. It could be letting yourself, I know I was sitting in the dark a lot, just like staring at the wall. Um, Maybe again, just kind of sitting with your feelings, sitting in silence was a big one too. And just really being kind and being gentle, and don't force yourself to do stuff if you feel like it's unnatural to you. That's that little voice in the back of your head. Just kind of take a step back and maybe do something else. I think that's probably my biggest piece of advice.
I love it. Yeah, giving ourselves some grace. I think that it takes practice for
It
sure.
does.
Because, like you said, we as women, as professionals, we're just so used to pouring out that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I think we forget that we need to pour in to ourselves,
Yep.
especially during times of healing after a broken relationship. I think the thing that I would advise anyone listening is ask for help.
Yes.
You know, as Jess and I talked, we had different, whether it was professionals, friends, spiritual advisors, we have different people in our lives that help us to walk along this journey. We know
Mm-hmm.
who we can call to be uplifted, we know who we shouldn't
Right.
call.
Right. Who you call when
Right.
you want to go outside? There's just different.
Right.
Right.
There's a whole, reach out to your community. You don't have to walk this journey alone. And what I can tell you, as someone who's gone through 3 failed marriages, I didn't ask for help when I should have.
Mm.
I live by this thought of when things stop hurting as much, I was healed, and that was so far from the truth. I lived by the thought of, oh, I've moved on, so I'm okay. That was so far
Mm-hmm.
from the truth. And so if you're listening and you're saying, gosh, I don't know what the next step is. I don't know how to move forward. Well, connect with someone who does, myself, someone like Jess. I mean, even listening to things like this podcast will help
It's a
you
step. Yeah.
to take the next step.
For sure. And I think just one more thing to add to something you
Mhm.
said earlier was with the cup runneth over idea, your cup has to be full for it to your what's running over is what you give to others. Your cup has to be full for yourself. And I think it's hard to do as women, but it's so necessary.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Jess, I mean, we had a conversation on your podcast. Tonight's conversation, I think, was I'm like, we could talk for hours about
We could.
about this for sure. But I just want to say thank you again for sharing your time, sharing your story, being authentic with us tonight. So I appreciate you and I thank you.
Thank you, April. I appreciate you for even having this podcast because I know when I was going through a breakup, multiple breakups, not even just the one I went through, that this would have been something helpful to hear, and it might have changed at least a little something. So I
Yeah.
hope that it hits the right people that need to hear it for sure.
Thank you for that. Along those lines, like I mentioned before, the whole reason why I started this podcast is because I remember that journey. And I remember trying to find a resource, and the people in my life at the time were like, girl, I've been married for 30 years. I don't know what to tell you. And I'm like, okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, that didn't help. Oh man. So I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's podcast. If you're looking for more resources, connect with Jess. Soul Sessions podcast. I've listened to a couple episodes. It's amazing. Stay connected with her on Instagram. I think your handle is Soul Sessions.
Hmm.
Awesome. Connect with her. If you guys are looking for more resources, go to whenlovecomes.com. I've got a bunch of stuff coming out over the next few weeks, so make sure you guys stay connected there. And I will see you guys next time on the When Love Comes podcast.